everybody, welcome back. I'm here again with the President, CEO of EAM Consulting Services, Erik Meyer. We are a Sandler training franchise facility team, and we've been going through these podcasts, making sure that we're staying engaged, we're sticking to our cookbooks, we're sticking to the Sandler rules, and today we're going to kind of deviate from that a little bit. Not specifically talk about a Sandler rule as there are the 49 rules in the book, but Erik, really kind of talk about what you and I talked about on the phone yesterday, our identity versus our role. And a big part of Sandler is kind of our I-10s and the I versus R. How do you want me to kind of lead you in on this, or do you just want me to shut up and let you roll?
Yeah, I can grab it. That'll work. I don't want to tell you to just shut up and let me roll, Chris, but I'll take it. So IR, there's a concept in Sandler that is probably one of my favorite ones to teach, and maybe the odd thing about it actually is it's really got nothing to do with technique of selling. And I'll back up for a second too, Chris. It's pretty common. Most of the people that we meet, potential clients, prospects, however we want to call them, most of them come to us with this idea of sales training being, what's a cool move? How do I get people to do stuff? What do I say? All of these kinds of things. And I know you run into that too. And it's not that we don't cover some of that, but it's always interesting. I find probably the biggest lessons aren't necessarily the technique side of the dialogue. They're more about the attitude side of the salesperson. And so at Sandler, we dig into three key areas: behavior, attitude, and technique. And so just real quickly for the listening audience, including your wife and my wife and our kids, behavior is—
My wife listens to these. That's impressive.
Yeah. And that one lady in Delaware, who we appreciate.
Yes.
So there's behavior, which is the things that you have complete control over doing, understanding what they are, having a plan around behaviors, and executing on them daily. So those are things like calls, emails, using LinkedIn, going to networking events, that kind of stuff. That's all behavior driven. We've got control over doing it or not doing it, and we get to decide every day if we do or don't do it. And then there's technique. So technique is how we kind of operate while we're doing behavior. So what are the things we say? What's the flow of that conversation? What are the words that we use? What's the language that we use? That's all technique side stuff. But then there's attitude, and on that triangle of behavior, attitude, and technique, attitude's up at the top, and it's there for a reason, because the attitude really will frame the behavior and the technique, and ultimately the attitude and belief system that goes with it will determine the level of success with the behavior and the technique. So when we were talking yesterday, and you kind of reminded me of IR, and we thought, hey, maybe that'd be a good topic. So it's baked into the Sandler rules. There's identity and role theory baked into all the Sandler rules. But I thought we could, let's spend a little time just talking about what IR is. So here's my, short description of identity and role theory. If you can picture, even back to an early age, before anyone got into a sales career, they began to get judgment value assigned to them. Right? The judgment value that was assigned to them was in line with roles that they were performing in. Right? So some of the early judgment values and roles were things like your first report card.
Yep.
So little Jimmy went off to school, and one day got to whatever grade it is now where you get your first report card. Yeah, and even though he felt great about himself, his teacher, went through there and gave him an A, a B, a C, a D, or an E. I don't think they don't give Fs anymore, do they?
I think it's all pluses and check marks at this grade now, but yeah, keep going.
Right. And so, here's Jimmy feeling good for a moment, but then all of a sudden being judged in his role as a student. And not that it wasn't an accurate assessment of his role, right? But it starts to create some complexities. And, when we compound on that, what ends up happening is, for most people, they start to feel good or bad about themselves based on how they're judged in the different roles that they operate in. And one of the exercises I like to take somebody through is to grab a clean sheet of paper and just start to list off all of the roles that they participate in a day-to-day basis. And you find that list can get pretty long, pretty quick. You know, the
Absolutely.
different hats, yeah, the different hats you wear, the different responsibilities that you might carry throughout the course of a day. So, you know, in the morning I wake up, Chris, and my first role is coffee maker, right? So I like to make the coffee for my wife and I. Now, sometimes I perform really well in that role. Sometimes I don't perform as well in that role. Maybe I didn't put enough scoops in or enough cinnamon to flavor it appropriately, right? But then that role leads into the role of husband when she wakes up, and you know, I get to see her for the first time in the morning. And then my kids get up, and now it's role of being dad, right? And then, you know, I get ready for work. I come to work, and it's role of, you know, running the business. And then somewhere in there, I'm making a sales call, and that's role of being a salesperson. And somewhere in there, I'm training, so that's role of being a trainer, right? So, you know, throughout the course of any given day, I'm going to carry a lot of different hats and a lot of different roles. And you're going to do the same thing, and everyone who's listening to this is going to do the same thing. So just as an exercise, if you've never done it before, write down all of the different roles that you operate in on any given day. And pretty soon you start to see there's quite a few of them.
And I want to jump in real quick. I know you're on a roll, but really to reaffirm that sometimes we have our Sandler speak where we kind of assume everyone knows exactly what we're talking about when it's acronyms or initialisms or whatever. But identity is the I and R is the role.
Yeah.
And the identity is really our values, our beliefs, our principles, our desires, our emotions. And the reason why I wanted us to cover this one is because all of our roles have changed in the last 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Because now, in addition to being a biomedical expert on Twitter, a groundskeeper, a landscaper, a chef, a housekeeper, all these, normally get the kids in the bus at 8, get to the office, work my butt off until 5, 6, 7 at night, do some networking events, go ref some lacrosse. A lot of my common normal roles that I identify with are gone. I am no longer a lacrosse official right now. There are no college games for me to go out and ref. There are no high school games for me to go out and ref. Yeah. My role as my son's lacrosse coach, gone. My role as a Cub Scout den leader, gone. Temporarily, but these are roles that I identify with. And now the new roles that I'm having to identify with, or the new roles that I'm fitting, like you said, some of these are now exponentially under the microscope. The dad role, the husband role, haven't left this house in 3 weeks. But the one thing that we really are trying to focus on in this conversation is not abandoning our identity.
Absolutely.
Our values, our beliefs, our principles, our desires, and our emotions should not change.
Yep.
We should not start all of a sudden becoming gluttonous, sloth, whatever the 7 deadly sins, let alone argumentative, abusive, patronizing, whatever. We need to stick to our identity, and I think that that's a big thing that people need to be reminded of right now.
Absolutely. And just thinking of that difference of identity and role, Chris, you touched on an important understanding about the difference between the two. And just for anyone listening on this, I could spend weeks and years helping people discover and understand what IR means. So I'm going to try to cram as much as I can here in the next 10 minutes. But so you've got your roles on this side, right? And then, like Chris mentioned, your identity. Your identity is your self-concept. It's the you without the roles, right? So it's who you are on the inside. It's who you are on your own without any external influences or forces. It's the true you. So the problem that we see is that what most people haven't done, or what most people haven't learned, or at least allowed themselves to be comfortable with, is that there's a difference between their I, their identity, and a difference between their R, which is their roles. And when we think about good, healthy selling, changing the mindset to focusing on only the things you can control versus the results of things that require more than one party makes a huge difference. And if you look at identity and you look at role, the problem with role value isn't that it's not real and it's not accurate, because sometimes it is, right? Actually, anytime I would argue it probably is, because it's coming from someone else and it's their perspective of how you're performing in that role. But that's the problem. It's always someone else's value judgment of you in that role, right? So, Chris, if you pick that one of being a lacrosse ref, right? That's a fun role. You may wrap up a game and go, man, I nailed it, except 90% of the people in the stands have a varying opinion as to whether or not you were a 10 out of 10 as the referee in that role. Is that fair?
It's one of those things. If they both hate you equally, you did a great job.
Yeah, it's just a really beautiful example, I think, of role performance. Now, if all you ever did was based your value as a referee on the opinions of others, that'd be pretty tough to stay at a high level as that referee role. So, where I find there's more value is not dismissing roles and the value being assigned to roles, but to understand which one makes the most sense. The value we associate and apply to our identity ultimately will determine the level we can operate at in our roles. So if we're using a 10 scale as an example, and I can separate the two, my identity and my role, and I work on my identity, and I'd say I'm a 10 on that 10 scale. I'm at the top level identity value. I'm a 10 on a 10. My role performance will have a tendency over time to elevate to match that value that I've assigned to my identity, right? I may have from time to time roles that drop down to a 1 or a 2, but if I'm a 10 on my identity value, I'm likely to do all the right stuff to get the role performance taking place. So the problem is that most people haven't separated the two of them. They haven't looked at it that way. And so they judge themselves on a daily basis based off of the opinions people are suggesting are relevant for their role performance. So as their role performance, varies up and down, they feel better, they feel worse, they feel better, they feel worse. And it's just a terrible fight every day to try to get role performance to match up. Probably the bigger problem too, I think, is the one that you mentioned. You've got roles there that you love, Chris, and I've got roles that I love. But the big problem with roles, any of them, even the most important ones, like being a father and a husband, to me and you, we don't control whether or not, we don't have 100% control over whether or not we get to keep those roles, right? Now, your wife may walk in one day and decide that you don't get to be husband anymore, right?
I hope not, but my behavior, yeah.
But, the reality is there isn't a single role that anyone has 100% control over, right? If one of your roles is a salesperson at company ABC, well, that company has a couple of down quarters and they go out of business, that role's gone, right? So understanding and making that healthy separation between what matters more and what to pay attention to makes a much bigger difference. And being able to take yourself out of your role values to focus on your identity first allows good role development to actually take place. So the flip side problem is if we're not focused on identity and we focus on role value, it's very difficult to grow your roles, because in order to grow, you're going to have to fail as you learn new skill sets and you go into new environments and you work on new things that are part of the growth of the roles. And if your entire self-worth is wrapped up in whether that role performance is good or bad, it's going to be a lot of disaster on a daily basis. I'll give you a quick example. So, I touched my face. I wasn't supposed to do that. I'm getting better.
I'm quarantined.
Yeah. So let me
once more.
Yeah, quick real world example.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I had to give a talk in front of a CEO forum group. And this was, almost 10 years ago. And I had somehow stumbled into getting an opportunity to give a talk to this group. There were about 30 CEOs of small, medium-sized companies. And I'd practiced this talk. I had done it a couple of times on my own. I had practiced it in front of a couple of friends. By the way, what do you think my friends told me about it?
You did great.
Yeah, it was great, right? Nice job, Erik. Good job, bud. You're going to be great. What do you think I told myself?
Man, you sucked.
And somewhere in between, right? So it was already conflicted. But I started to feel good, right, about the possibility I might pull this off, until I had about 10 minutes prior to taking, the stage to give the talk. Then all of a sudden, a couple of things became very real for me very quickly. The first one was I'd never really done this before, right? So that kind of crept into my head. So then as I was thinking about, I'd never really done this, but I practiced it, but I'd never really done it. Then I started thinking maybe it wasn't going to go so well. And then I started thinking maybe it was actually going to go really badly. And then I started thinking maybe they were going to just start laughing at me when I showed up, and it would hurt my feelings and I would be very disappointed in myself. And then somewhere around there, I forgot everything I was supposed to say, right? And then I started freaking out, right? I'm sweating all over the place. And it's 5 minutes before I got to go on now. So I thought about IR. And for me, personally, this was the first time where I really got to use the concept and think about it logically and apply it to an environment. So I said, well, if I don't, kind of buy into IR, I'm going to be worried about my role as a speaker. I'm going to be concerned about that. I'm going to go out worried and concerned about that role. I'll deliver my best, but it may not be my best, and I'll take it personally. Right. And the worst part about that is that it may become so crippling that I might never do it again. And then I thought about, kind of the flip side of it was this thing called IR. Well, if I just focus on my identity, I can be a 10. No one else gets to put any input in there. It's just me and my call. And if I'm a 10 in my I can make a healthy separation between my R and just say, this is my role as a first-time presenter in front of a group like this. It's not going to be the best version anyway. It's just a role of me being a speaker for the first time in front of a group like this. But if I'm an I-10, it doesn't matter if I get 10R performance or 1R performance, I'll be able to do it again. I'll work on it. I'll get better at it. I'll take it the right way. And so I went out and I gave the talk because I thought that sounded better and it put me at ease. And I gave the talk. And when I was done, 2 people came up to me afterwards and said, hey, that was very valuable. One of them became an early client. And again, another great version of what IR really looks like. So there were 30 people in there, let's say. 2 of them came up to me afterwards. So those 2 at least gave me a role somewhere north of like 5, I'm guessing. But the other 28 didn't come up to me afterwards. They may have given me a role 1. I gave the same talk to the whole group. Fair?
Yeah.
Which is one of the other problems of worrying about R at all. You're giving your same role performance over and over and over again with different judgments. So if I'm wrapping, go ahead, Chris.
If I can paraphrase,
yeah,
or if I can sum up a nice other Sandler technique, how you rate yourself, your identity between an 8 and a 10, healthy self-image, healthy self-perception. No matter what role you're playing, that role could get a 1, 2, 3. It doesn't affect your identity and your self-image if you are a 10. So what I want to go back to is, we say every phone call we make, every no pressure prospecting call could have 1 of 4 outcomes. Mm-hmm. Focusing on the no's as a way of learning, as a way of being positive about your role as a salesperson can directly affect your I. If you get off that call and the guy said, just laid off our sales team, just lost our budget, shutting the company down. No, go take a pen and shove it in your thigh, as we like to joke about. That doesn't affect my role as a salesperson because I learned something from that call. And it definitely doesn't affect my I, my identity as a person based on my values, beliefs, principles, desires, and emotions. Yep. I'm going to still focus on getting on that next call. I'm going to focus on sticking to my cookbook, my behaviors, my activities. I'm not going to go and cuddle up on the couch and put a blanket over my head and pretend the world's mean because my I is a 10. I identify as a positive, strong self-image person. So I want to kind of wrap it back to people that might be watching this, our friend in Delaware. Every day you turn on the news and there's another report on cases, deaths, shutdowns, economy. Okay. This is data that we need to take into consideration, but we can't let it affect our identity and the fact that our values, our beliefs, our principles are not changing in all of this. We need to stick to our identities. And while our roles are changing, one role that we have, the salesperson, we need to stick to our behaviors on it.
Absolutely. And even if, we go out of, when we're taping this stuff in the Corona crisis, there are always shifts and changes and adjustments to role performance. And again, having no control over any of that. So that will always be true. It was true before, it'll be true after. And our identity will always determine what level we can operate at in our roles. So let's focus on that side and be an I-10. And it just starts by understanding that concept and starting to make that separation between who you I and who you are, we like to say. Right?
Yeah.
One other quick thought on that one too, and you can see it, and hopefully this will land with some of the people that listen to this. If you don't make a healthy separation between your roles and your identity, there's a trickling effect in a very negative way where poor role performance creeps into other roles. So let's say, role performance as a salesperson, you have a bad day, you don't get a lot of good conversations, and you haven't made a healthy separation between role performance as a parent. Well, as soon as you're done with the sales role, if you haven't separated the two, pretty soon parent role takes a lot of that baggage and brings that in.
Yep.
Brings that one down, right? And so being able to, in a healthy way, compartmentalize roles again, we see that being a very freeing version of how people can operate, and focus on the right stuff. Your identity will ultimately determine the level your roles can rise to, but it'll also determine the level that your roles fall to. And somewhere in between, whatever that value of an identity is for someone, that's where their comfort zone gets created. So I'll recommend and suggest, if you write down the value of your I, make it a 10. You're not right or wrong. It's your call. No one else can impact it. So pick a 10. Go for it.
Yeah. So we're a little bit over. I do want to wrap this up with a couple of things. The landscape, the market of some of the people that we coach and consult is going to change significantly. You know, we've talked to some industries where they've laid off the sales staff. I had a long conversation with an automotive consultant the other day, in really what the market will look like and how do they open the doors to a showroom with social distancing. Are they selling online? Are they doing virtual walkarounds? And what the sales force will really look like. Those that don't have a sales process in place are going to be chasing internet leads. They're going to be chasing and chasing and chasing. They need a sales process. So I guess that would be kind of my ask at the end of this is we're in Detroit. We know a lot of people in automotive. We know a lot of people in the automotive industry. We know a lot of people at the OEM level and especially at the dealership level. We want to talk to people with the dealerships. If you know somebody that is a salesperson, sales manager, dealer principal, have them reach out to us. eam.sandler.com is our website. You can find Erik on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever. We want to get in front of those sales organizations now because really automotive is the heartbeat of Detroit. And I think those sales organizations need a real clear upfront contract and a real clear sales process as they try to transition from, say they had 20 salespeople. Are all 20 of them back? Are 6 of them back? Or 12 of them? You know, it's going to be a unique landscape. So if anyone knows anybody in automotive, please have them reach out to Erik and I. I think it's a conversation that we would like to have and some people who could really help.
Awesome. Chris, we're going to do another one?
Well, after we wrap up this one with our tagline.
Train hard.
Sell easy. Thanks, everybody.
I like it.